everyone, welcome to the Jayda and Stitches Show, and welcome back to Granny's Magical Cupboard Calendar Blanket. We are making granny squares this year, one new design every single month. In January we did the stacked shells, in February we did the doubles and V's, and this month, March, we are going to explore the Jacob's Ladder Granny Square. This is such a cool pattern. If you've made a Jacob's Ladder stitch pattern in the past, we have a scarf tutorial. I'll link that below if you want to give that a try. You'll know that it's basically just double crochets and then you're interspersing little chain 10 loops every row or so, making sure that those loops all stay on top of each other so that when you get to the end of the project you can loop all those loops together and it ends up with this really nifty braided effect. Well, it's the same concept, we're just working in the round to turn it into a square. This square will upsize to about 10 rows, I'm going to say, maybe a little bit bigger depending on your stitch to hook ratio, like how tight your tension is, maybe the yarn that you're using. But keep in mind that as you get further and further away from the center of the square, your looped or braided effect gets further and further and further apart. So you can imagine that if this square was quite large, like a big square, those 8 braided points would be quite far apart, so you'd have an awful lot of sort of just plain space in between them. So I wouldn't look at this particular granny square pattern as one that you can infinitely size up. You can definitely make it more rows than I've done here. I'm doing all of my rows, all of my granny squares this year are 6 rows each, but you can definitely make this 8 rows, 10 rows, 12 rows, whatever. But I wouldn't go much bigger than maybe 16 inches in size, just because of the distance between those points, those spreading braided points. I've made this one in my gold and my darker blue color, and today I'm going to demonstrate with those other 3 colors I've been using, the other blues and yellows, bright yellow, bright blue, and white, and I've changed color every row. I'm going to show you how to change color every row, and of course I'll explain if you don't want to change color, how that looks. Very simple, because this looks really cool all in one color too. It just sort of brings more attention to that braided effect. It is not a difficult square. I want you to think of it like a solid double crochet granny square with little chain 10 loops intermixed in it. So you've got a chain 10 loop in every single one of your corners and 1 per side. Other than that, it's just double crochets. So let's grab our hooks, grab our yarn. We'll head on over to the craft table and we will stitch up a Jacob's Ladder granny square together. In order to make our Jacob Ladder square, I'm using a size 4 medium weight acrylic yarn. You're going to want 40 yards in total of your yarn. If you're using 3 colors, that's 12 to 15 yards per color. 20 yards if you're using 2 colors, so 20 yards per color for 2, or just 40 yards of a single color. You're going to want a pair of scissors, a yarn needle. Stitch markers are very helpful in this project. I'm using a 5.5 millimeter hook, also known as an eye or a 9. And I'm using 3 colors today. This is a 2-color version. I'll be demonstrating using 3 colors, yellow, blue, and white. And once you've got all that together, we can get started. To begin our square, we're going to start with a slip knot. And we're going to chain 5. We are making a chained ring to begin, so once you've chained 5, find the first chain you made and slip stitch to join. You can work over top of your short tail if you like, or leave it out to the back and weave it in later. The first row that we create establishes that very familiar shell stitch. So we're starting with shells, 3 double crochet equals a shell, but the difference with this square is that we're also establishing our chained loops that we will then be carrying all the way through the rest of the square. So here we go. The chain 3 at the beginning of a row, 1, 2, 3, counts as a double crochet into the ring, and now we create our first chained loop. Chain 10, you'll have a chain of 10 coming out of the top of that middle double crochet, slip stitch into the top of that double crochet, and then double crochet into the ring again. So that is an establishing shell for side 1 of the row, the first row of our square. So row 1, side 1. Chain 3 counts as a double crochet, chain 10 slip stitch into the top of the double crochet into the ring. Okay, here we go into the first corner. we are going to chain 11. You're going to slip stitch into the second chain that you made, or the 10th chain away from the hook. So basically, look for chain number 1. Here's chain number 2 above it. You're going to slip stitch into that chain. That creates the loop for your first corner, and I recommend putting a stitch marker on that just so you know that's a corner loop and not a loop sort of for the side of your square, because it does get a little confusing in the first row. Then we're going to chain 1 more, and we're going to start side 2. Double crochet into the ring, double crochet again, chain 10, slip stitch into the top of the double crochet that you left, and double crochet once more into the ring. All right, let's take a pause and look at what we've got. Here's side 1, chain 3, double crochet, chain 10, slip stitch, double crochet. So that's the sort of a shell with a chain loop in the middle of it. We chained 11, slip stitched into the 10th chain, or the second one away from the double crochet there, and then chained 1 more. So we've got a chain 10 loop, and a chain. So your corners are still technically 2 chains. It's just that we want to create a chain 10 loop in the middle of it. Mark that with a stitch marker because it does help sort of make it a corner, sort of mark it as a corner as opposed to one of the loops along the side. And then we did another shell. Double crochet, chain 10, slip stitch, double crochet. Let's do another corner. Chain 11, that first chain is like the chain 1 of a regular corner and a double crochet. After you've chained 11, come back and slip stitch into that second chain you made. That creates your next loop. Grab yourself a stitch marker and mark it. Chain 1 more before you leave, because remember your corners are usually 2 chains. It's just that we're putting a big loop in the middle of it. And immediately we're into another side. Double crochet into the ring, double crochet, chain 10, slip stitch back into the top of that double crochet. The slip stitching at the end of a chain 10 are what secure our loops, and they don't make them too loose. They actually create a loop. Double crochet once more into the ring, and that is the third side complete. So we've got side 1, corner, side 2, corner, side 3. Let's make our third corner. Chain 11, remembering that the first chain is like the chain 1 of the corner, and then chain 10 for the loop. Come all the way back down to that second chain away, slip stitch to join, chain 1 more, it's the other kind of half of the corner, and now we're making our fourth side. Double crochet into the ring. I'm going to pause and just put a stitch marker on that big loop so I know that's a corner. There we go. Double crochet again. That's the middle double crochet, so we chain 10. Slip stitch into the top of the double crochet to secure the chain 10 loop. Double crochet once more into the ring. That's the fourth side complete. So you've got quite the fancy looking little thing sitting under your hook now. And we have one more corner to do. So you're going to have 8 loops, 8 chain 10 loops in every single row. 4 of them will be corners, 4 of them will be in the middle of your sides. So start thinking 8 loops. If you don't see 8 loops by the time you're ending a row, you've missed one. So our 8th loop is going into our 4th corner. We're going to chain 11.
Make sure I don't twist things here. Come on back down. That's the first chain, so I want to slip stitch into the second chain. That's chain number 10 from the hook. Chain one more to complete the corner, and find your chain 3 that began the row, slip stitch to join in the top of it, just like you would any other granny square. Now because that's a corner, I'm going to mark it with a stitch marker. I'm going to pull up on my loop and just take my hook out of the way so we can see what we're looking at here. So there's my working loop. I've got 4 distinct sides and 4 corners. I've got my 4 corner loops marked with my stitch markers. I can pull out on them and you can really see that square now. There's the 3 double crochet per side. There's a chain 10 loop in the middle of each side, and of course there's 4 chain 10 loops in each corner. 8 chain 10 loops per side, and you will always have 8 chain 10 loops per side, and that's what ends up getting braided all the way from the center out. Alright, if you are changing colors, you're going to fasten off and get your new color. If you are not changing colors, just pause. You're not going to move. There's no slip stitching ahead. We're all going to start in the same place. So if you've joined with a slip stitch in the top of that chain 3 and you're not changing colors, just hang on. For those of us that are, you can pause, snip your yarn, fasten off. You can weave these tails in later. Get color number 2. I'm going to switch now to white. I'm going to put a slip knot on my hook. I'm going to join my yarn with a slip stitch in the top of the chain 3. So we're all starting in the same place. If you are still keeping with the same color, you're just pausing. If you are changing colors, you can change your color, fasten off, slip stitch to join your new color in the same place. So it's top of that chain 3 that began the row. A little different than some of the other designs that we like to do here, but we all want to start in the same place. Okay, here we go. Everybody, let's find my yarn here. Chain 3. When you get up to a chain 10 loop, it's sitting on top of a double crochet from the previous row. We need to make sure that we create a double crochet and a chain 10 loop that's pretty much directly in alignment with the one from the previous row. So that's it here. This is the double crochet stitch. So if you're right-handed, you're pulling it to the left, that's the stitch. If you're left-handed, you are pulling it to the right and it's on the other side. That's if you're working left-handed. That is the top of the double crochet. We are going to double crochet into that stitch. I might just work over top of my short tails here. Why not? So that's the double crochet into the next double crochet. Now we create our chain 10 loop. And as per normal, come on back and slip stitch into the top of that double crochet that you just made. You'll have something that looks like this. Take that loop from the previous row, pull it forward, get it out of the way. You want to make sure you always are pulling your loops forward. They all need to be on the front of your work. This is the next double crochet. So the next double crochet next to the loop, there's going to be like a little knot or a slip stitch where you created the loop in the previous row. Look for the next stitch, the next double crochet into that. And I'm working over top of my little short tails here. You don't have to do that. There we go. Okay, so here we go. We've got a chain 3 to begin that sits directly on top of the chain 3 from the previous row. Then we double crochet into the top of the next stitch, which is sort of hiding, but it's right there. Created our new chain 10 loop, pulled the previous loop forward, and then double crocheted into the next stitch. This looks messy, but don't worry, it's going to look like this. I promise. Okay, let's get into the corner. Into the corner, here's my hanging loop. I'm going to just take my stitch marker out momentarily. We have a chain 10 loop, slip stitch, and a chain. Remember that. Into the corner before the new loop. So before the corner loop, we're going to work 2 double crochet into the space, 2 double crochet into the chain 2 corner. Then we're going to do this, chain 11. That first chain counts as a corner chain. So that's a chain of 11. You want to slip stitch into that second chain away to make your little loop. Chain 1 more. Grab that corner loop, pull it forward. I'm still working over my short tails here. We are not leaving the corner space yet. So there's the corner space. Grab that loop from the previous row, pull it forward, pull it out of your way, and work 2 more double crochets into the corner. And I will repeat that here in a second. So you have to kind of consider your loops as this thing that you are creating but are kind of going to ignore. See, it's starting to look a little normal here. So chain 3, double crochet, chain 10 loop, pull your loop out of the way, double crochet. You get to the corner. Before you do anything, 2 double crochet into the corner space. Kind of like a regular solid double crochet granny square. So 2 double crochet into the corner space. Chain 11, the first chain is that chain 1 going into the corner. Slip stitch into the 10th chain to create your chain 10 loop. Chain 1 more. Pull this guy out of the way. So the previous row's loop, pull it out of the way. 2 more double crochet into the corner. So 2 double crochet, chain 11, slip stitch into the 10th chain, chain 1, pull that loop out of the way, 2 double crochet into the corner. And then it'll look like that when you've got it all sitting there nice and neat in front of you. Mark your corner, or you can even, if you want to, pin these 2 together just to kind of keep things a little neat and tidy, because it does get a little funny. And now we're back to another side. This is how it works. Double crochet into the next stitch, nice and normal. Double crochet into the next stitch. Remember, it's sitting at the base of that chain 10 loop. Create your chain 10 loop. Come on back down and slip stitch into the top of the double crochet that you left. Grab that loop, pull it out of the way, and you're looking for the next double crochet after it to double crochet into. Double crochet right into that stitch. There we go. And now those loops sit on top of each other. So all of your loops are always going to be to the front. And that brings us to another corner. So let's do this other corner together, and then I'll let you finish the row. Into the corner space, you start with 2 double crochet, very normal, just like a regular old square. 2 double crochet into the corner. Now we want to create the loop, but we also want to create the chain 2 corner at the same time. So we chain 1, you can think of it like this, chain 1 for the corner, chain 10, and slip stitch into the 10th chain, which is 1 away. So your chain 1 plus chain 10 or chain 11, slip stitch into the 10th chain, chain the other one for your corner, pull that loop out of the way, 2 more double crochet into the original chain 2 corner before you leave. So the corners get 2 double crochet, chain 11, slip stitch into the 10th chain, chain 1, and then 2 double crochet. And there we go. Okay, I'm going to turn you loose for the rest of row 2. Double crochet, chain 10, slip stitch into the top of the double crochet, pull your loop out of the way, double crochet, into the corner, double crochet, chain 11, slip stitch into the 10th chain, pull your loop out of the way, chain 1, 2 more double crochets into that chain 2 space, and then you're on to your last side. Double crochet, chain 10, slip stitch, double crochet, always keeping your previous row's loops to the front and out of the way. Into your last corner, 2 double crochet, chain 11, slip stitch into the 10th chain, chain 1, 2 double crochet before you leave, remembering to keep that loop forward, and I'll catch up with you at the beginning. Take your time, no rush. At the end of the row, you'll finish your last corner. Remember to always keep pulling your loops from the previous row forward. So 2 double crochet into the corner, chain 11, slip stitch into the 10th chain, chain 1 more, pull that loop forward, 2 double crochet into the corner, and that brings you up to the chain 3 that began the row. You can slip stitch to join. It's helpful to lay it down, pull all of your little loops out. I like to do this at the end of every row. I'll get my loop hook out of the way there. Making sure that all of my corners are pulled out. I've got my corner loops marked just so I know that I've got all of them. Making sure you've got 8 chained loops. There you go. You can take your stitch markers out for a second if you want and just admire your work. Making sure all of your loops are sitting on the front of your work. See how neat and tidy that's starting to look? If you are changing colors, you can fasten off. If you are not changing colors, just pause where you are. I've got my stitch markers back in. I'm going to fasten off. I am bringing in a third color now. That will be yellow. Let me get my white out of the way. Start with a slip knot. We're going to join our yarn with a slip stitch in the same place that we fastened off, so we're all starting in the same place whether you are changing color or not. And we can all chain 3 to begin. As we continue with the rows, you're going to see the pattern making more and more sense. It's going to become more and more familiar. So for example, the chain 3 that you begin with is always right next to the stitch that is your first double crochet and then a chain 10 loop. So double crochet into that next stitch. I guess I'll work over top of my short tails again, why not? And then we're right into a chain 10 loop. The chain 10 loops always sit directly in alignment with each other. Come on back, slip stitch into the top of that double crochet. That creates the loop. Pull your loops forward, making sure they're always out of the way. And then you've got the double crochet right next to that little knotted slip stitch that created your loop. That's your double crochet. And then you've got 2 more because you put 2 double crochets into the corner. So let's do those. Double crochet into the next stitch, and then a double crochet into each of the next 2 stitches, and that brings us up to our first corner. Here's our corner. You've got loop from row 1, loop from row 2. You're focusing on that chain 2 space, 2 double crochet into the chain 2 space. This is going to look familiar after a while. And now you want to create your corner and your loop. So chain 1, if you want to think of it like that, plus chain 10 or chain 11. Come on back and slip stitch into the 10th chain from the hook. Chain 1 more, so that's your corner made. Chain 1, 10 chain loop, slip stitch, chain 1 more, pull your loops forward. It's mostly the one from the previous row you've got to worry about. There's your chain 2 space still below you. I'm going to work over the top of those tails, 2 more double crochet into that space before you go. Oops. Slack on my yarn. Sometimes it helps to pull the loop right out of the way. There we go. And then pause. Make sure that everything is still sitting, all the loops are still sitting on the front. So there's my loops, my first 3 loops are all in the front. Here are all my corner loops. And then you can smooth them back if you want. It will look very neat and tidy, I promise. Put your stitch marker back on your corner loop, and then you're on to your side. You've got 4 double crochet, a chain 10 loop, and 3 double crochet. So we want to work a double crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. That's the 2 from the corner from the row previous, plus the 2 before the loop. So 4 double crochet before you get to your chain 10 loop on the side. Now we do the chain 10 loop. Slip stitch back into the top of the double crochet. That creates your loop. Pull your previous loop out of the way, and you've got 1, 2, 3 stitches left in that side. So if you get confused about where to put your hook, just pause, pull everything out of the way, pull your stitches apart, look for the posts of those stitches, and the top of the next stitch will appear for you. There we go. Double crochet into each of the next 2, and then we're into the next corner. 2 double crochet into the corner, chain 11, slip stitch into the 10th chain from the hook, chain 1 more, pull your loops out of the way, 2 more double crochet into the corner space before you leave, and onwards. After you finish a side, after you finish a corner, it's always good to just sort of pause and make sure all your loops are facing forward, they're all in alignment. At the end of row 3, so row 1, you've got 3 double crochet per side. Row 2, you've got 7 double crochet per side. At the end of row 3, you'll have 11 double crochet per side, remembering you'll always have 8 chain 10 loops, and those loops will always be in alignment with the loops from the previous row. So 4 in the corners and 4 for the 4 sides. 1 per side, 1 per corner. Okay, I'm going to let you work away at the end of row 3. 2 double crochet into the corner. Do your chain 11 and then chain slip stitch into the 10th chain for your loop. Don't forget that other chain, that's the other half of your corner. Make sure you're pulling those loops forward. 2 double crochet into the corner space before you go. And then you're back into double crochets. 4 double crochet, chain 10 loop, 3 double crochet, and then another corner. And I'll see you at the end of row 3. At the end of row 3 and every row here on after, I want you to sort of take extra special note when you're finishing the row. You'll always have 2 double crochet in the last corner space after the loop, so your corners are always 2 double crochet into the chain 2 corner space, chain 11, slip stitch into the 10th chain, chain 1 more, pull previous loop forward, 2 double crochet into the corner space. So think of it like that. 2 double crochet, chain 1, chain 10 loop, chain 1, 2 double crochet. That is every single corner. When you leave the corner, don't forget to pull back to make sure you don't miss the top of that first stitch. So there's the 2 double crochet from the previous row, and that brings you up to the chain 3 that began the row. So every row begins in the top of the chain 3. There's a double crochet immediately next to it before you start your first chain 10 loop. So every row will end. By the time you get up to it, you should see a double crochet, like the chain 3 and the double crochet, and you'll be finishing on the top of the stitches from the previous row. This little guy right here, that's the slip stitch or the false stitch that happens every single time you join a row with a slip stitch when you're working in a round, whether it's a square or a circle. So I don't want you to mistake it as a stitch. If you get confused, you will have 6 stitches at the end of row 3. At the end of row 4, you'll have 8 stitches. So just that little space between the corner. So there's 4 plus 2, that's 6 for row 3. You'll have that much plus 2 more again for the next row, and then that much plus 2 more again for the next row, and so on. So if you get confused, just go, I've got my 2 in the corner, and there's 2 stitches. I've got 1 for each of them, and then there's my chain 3. There's the chain 3 to begin, so I know I can skip that little space. Just to help keep track of stitches. Then you join with a slip stitch into the top of the chain 3 that began the row, and I like to just pause, make sure all of my loops are on the front, and then just to admire them, pull them all down so that they're all sort of sitting on top of each other. Get my hook out of the way. And move my stitch markers if I have to. I want to make sure my stitch markers are always sitting kind of on those outer corner loops. If it really feels wrangly, then you can sort of snip, or not snip, but clip some of your stitch markers, your loops together, if you find that helps. But at the end of every row, just lay it all down. You should have 8 chain loops in every single row. They should all be in alignment. Each corner has 1, and each side has 1 right in the middle. And at the end of row 3, each side will have 11 stitches, so 11 double crochets, plus your chain 10 loop in the middle. All 4 of your corners will have a chain 10 loop. And we just continue from there. So I'm going to change colors again. You don't have to if you're making a solid color or wherever you're doing it. We always start in the top of the chain 3, right there. Whether you're not changing colors or you are changing colors. Your first double crochet always sits right next to that chain 3, then you start with your chain 10 loop, join with a slip stitch, and then when you leave, you're working into the next double crochet that's right at the base. If you get confused, just pause, pull apart all of your double crochets, and the top of it will show itself right there at the bottom of the chain 10 loop. So just take your time. With all these loops, it can get to be a little kind of harried when you're looking at it, but wow, does it ever look cool when you get the whole thing together. So I'm going to pause now and change colors again. I've joined my blue, I'm back to blue again, so I've joined my new color with a slip stitch in the top of the chain 3. If you're not changing colors, that's fine. If you are, doesn't matter. We're all chaining 3 to begin. The first thing you do is double crochet into the next double crochet, which is right at the base of the chain 10 loop from the previous row, and then you immediately start a new chain 10 loop. So every row begins the same way. Chain 3 to begin, double crochet into the next stitch, chain 10 loop immediately. So that's the very middle of the row. Always pull the other loop forward and out of your way. Your next double crochet, if it's hard to see, just take a pause and go up. There it is. There's the top of it. And I double crochet right into the top of it. Double crochet in every single stitch up into the chain 2 corner space. So every side is now basically the same. You're just adding 4 double crochets per side per row from here on out. You double crochet in every single stitch all the way up to the corner. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you get confused, just pause, check them out. That brings me up to the corner space. Corners are all the same. 2 double crochet into the corner space. And then your corner, chain 1, chain 10 loop, chain 1 or chain 11. Slip stitch into the 10th chain, chain 1, grab that loop from the previous corner, and finish with 2 more double crochet into the corner space. So you are always starting and ending a side with 2 double crochet in the corner space. You are also creating the new corner, which is chain 1, chain 10 loop, chain 1, making sure that all of your corner loops are always pulled to the front. I'm going to move my stitch marker. And then you look at your next side. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 double crochets to do before you get to your chain 10 loop. Always pull back a little bit on the corner to make sure you see the top of that first double crochet. Get a double crochet in every single one of those stitches all the way up to the chain 10 loop. The chain 10 loop will always be in the very middle of the row, or the side I should say. Chain 10 loop, slip stitch to join, pull the other one out of the way, and if you get confused, just pause, go, ah, there's my next double crochet, I have to work into the top of it. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 4 more double crochets left in this side before I get up to the corner. And when you get to the corner, it's 2 double crochet, chain 11, slip stitch into the 10th chain, chain 1, 2 double crochet, and then you're back onto another side. So 2 double crochet into the corner, there's my chain 11. I'm going to slip stitch into the 10th chain from the hook, chain 1 more, so there's my little corner taken care of. Grab that loop, pull it forward. I'm not done with the chain 2 space. 2 more double crochet into it. This sets me up for the next side. So each side grows by 4 double crochet every row. So our previous row, row 3, you had 9 double crochet per side. Add 4, you should have 11 double crochet. I'm sorry, you had 11 double crochet in row 3, add 4, you'll have 15 double crochet per side at the end of row 4. So there's your 11 double crochet, and you're getting 2 and 2 in each corner space. They're like little bumpers. So that increases the side stitch count to 15 per side for row 4. You do not change the number of chain 10 loops. You're always going to have 8 of them all the way around. 1 per corner, 1 per side. And you can continue this pattern. So always make sure you get that double crochet right at the base of the chain 10 loop when you get up to it. Don't forget your chain 10 loop. So get that whole loop made and complete. Then you pull that loop from the previous row forward. Always pause, make sure you're not missing the next double crochet that you're going to work into. And continue. This is a pattern that's very easy to do. You just need to remember to stop and count and make sure that all of your loops are in the right place. So it's really just double crocheting and chaining, making sure you've always got the right number of stitches, and that's all you've got to do. So I'm going to let you finish row 4 and row 5, or if you're making a square that is multiple rows, get up to your second last row and complete that. For me, that'll be row 5. So you're going to finish row 4 and do row 5. I'll pick things up with you at the end of row 5 because row 6 is special. Once you get to the end of your second last row, now is a good time to just take a quick stock of what you've got. You should have 8 loops per row. All loops should be on the front of your work. You can pull out your corners. This is row 5 for me, the end of row 5. That's my second last row because I'm making a 6-row granny. If you're making an 8-row granny, this would be row 7. If you're making a 10-row granny, this would be row 9, etc. Every row grows by a total of 16 double crochets per row, or to look at it by side, because I like to count my sides, row 1 has 3 double crochet on each side, plus a chain 10 loop on each side and 1 in each corner. So row 1, 3 double crochet per side, row 2, 7 double crochet, row 3, 11 double crochet, row 4, 15 double crochet, row 5, 19 double crochet, etc. So take a moment, make sure you've got 8 loops per row, all of your stitch count is correct, and then you can decide to change colors. I've fastened off, I'm getting ready to do my last row, or you can just continue with the same color, that's fine too. Here's the fun part, now we get to do some braiding. So I'm going to take my stitch markers out. You can start with any set of loops you want. You take loop number 1, I'm going to zoom in here just so you can really see what I'm doing. You're going to take loop number 1, take loop number 2, and pull loop number 2 through loop number 1. Loop number 3 goes through loop number 2. Loop number 4 goes through loop number 3. And loop number 5 goes through loop number 4, etc. So the loop from the next row, so row 2 goes through row 1, row 3 goes through row 2, row 4 goes through row 3. You're always grabbing the loop and pulling it through the loop of the row before it. And this is how we get this really nifty braided look. So here's 1, here's 2, 2 goes through 1, 3 goes through 2, 4 goes through 3, and so on. So you're going to take a moment, you're going to work all the way around, make sure you get all 8 sets of loops. You're going to braid them all up so that your last row has its little loops sticking straight out. You might not even need your stitch markers anymore because this is going to really bring some structure to your square. Take a moment and do that, and then we're going to do our final row together. You should have something that looks a bit like a snowflake. All of your loops are now braided out into the correct sort of alignment. So each row goes through the row previous, and all of your last row loops are now sticking out the top. I have joined my new color in the top of my chain 3 with a slip stitch. If you're not changing color, that's fine. It's the same beginning as every previous row so far. We all chain 3 to begin, and we double crochet as normal into the next stitch. If you have to, kind of pull your loops out of the way just to make sure you see that stitch. Double crochet. Then you're going to take your loop, slip it over your hook. So you're taking the loop, putting your hook right through it. Whoop. Nothing fancy there. Pull everything out of the way on the other side so that you can see that other stitch. I'm working over my little short tails. So there's the stitch right there that I want to work into. And I just double crochet into it. I'm not chaining, I'm not doing anything fancy, I'm just slipping the loop over my hook as I double crochet into the next stitch to catch it in the top of that stitch. That way I will maintain the correct stitch count across the side. Easy peasy. From here on out, you just double crochet into each stitch as usual. I'm just trapping my little short tails as I go. When you get to the corner, you're going to work 2 double crochet into the corner space. Remember, if you have to kind of pull those loops out of the way, no problem. 2 double crochet into the corner space, chain 1 to start the corner, grab the loop, slip your hook through it, chain 1, that just catches the loop. Move everything aside so you can still see that chain 2 corner and work 2 double crochet into it. So you are still working 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet into the corner. We're just not creating a new loop. We're catching the loop from the previous row in the top of it. You're going to double crochet in each stitch all the way across up to the stitch before your loop, and I'll catch up with you there. As you get up to your next loop, double crochet in the stitch just before it. Pause to make sure everything is braided up in the right direction. Slip your hook through that loop. Pull everything out of the way so you can see the top of the next stitch. So here's the stitch, there's the top of it, and just double crochet. Nothing fancy. You're just catching that loop in the top of the double crochet. We are not catching it with a chain 1 or anything special because we don't want to change the stitch count worked along the side of our square. So you double crochet in every single stitch, and at the end of the row you can just sort of pause and pull up on that loop to make it a little more even. That's what I like to do sometimes as I go, just so I can sort of enjoy it as I work, but sometimes when I finish I will make sure everything looks nice and neat and tidy. Double crochet in every single stitch. this is the finishing row. So it's the last row of the square. Double crochet in each stitch up to the corner, and the corners are the same. Get into that chain 2 corner, work 2 double crochet, chain 1, remember it's chain 2s in the corner, but before you chain your second chain, just slip that loop over your hook, chain your second chain, pull everything out of the way. So you want to make sure you still see that chain 2 space. 2 more double crochet into the corner. So 2 double crochet, chain 1, slip that loop over your hook, chain your second chain, 2 double crochet, and then continue. Make sure you don't miss the top of that next stitch, double crochet in every single stitch all the way across. When you get to the chain 10 loop, just slip it on your hook and continue double crocheting. That's all you need to do. As you finish the row, you're going to join with a slip stitch to the top of the chain 3 one last time. You can fasten off. Take a moment to weave in all your tails. And this is the fun part of this square. I like to lay it down, grab my corners, pull them out, and then I'm going to go around, I'm going to grab all of those loops and just evenly pull them out so that they're on the front. There we go. And then this one can be blocked too. You can also just run around and hand block it. Pull out those corners. And look how lovely that square is. This is such a cool square. I just love that snowflake kind of starburst sort of effect that you get. 8 sets of braided loops. This looks good in stripes, it looks good in color blocking, it even looks good in one solid color. Make sure you've logged, or I should say you've woven in all of your little tails, especially if you were changing color like me, and maybe if you weren't working over top of them. And that's it.
The Jacob's Ladder Granny Square. I just love this one. Basically just a solid double crochet granny square with this nifty braided effect running across the top of it. I really love how that looks. I hope you guys enjoyed making this one along with me as well. If you want to block your squares before you join them, you can do that. I know some of you are already doing that. And I say that because it doesn't matter. I don't block my squares before I join them, but I know some of you like to kind of have them all the same size and shape. Squares will differ in their overall sizing because of the stitch pattern. So for example, you might find your Jacob's Ladder square is a little bit bigger than your February square, maybe even a little bit bigger than your January square, but as long as all of your squares have the same number of rows and the correct number of stitches per side at the end of your final row, then joining them together won't be a problem. So don't worry too much about whether they're a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller than their neighbor, because when you join them all together, that will sort itself out with the right stitch count and the right row count. But if you like to lay things out and you like everything to look neat and tidy, go ahead and block them. I'll link to our blocking tutorials in the description box down below if you've got questions about that. I'll also include that Jacob's Ladder scarf pattern. So if you really like the concept of the Jacob's Ladder and it's new to you, you might want to try our scarf. Nice and fun, very simple, very pretty. Kind of is like, it's like getting a thick cabled effect, like without having to do all of the extra cable stitch work, I guess is another way you could look at it. Anyway, if you would like to pick up our written pattern, you'll find it in our Etsy shop, and a big thank you to all of you who have picked up our Granny's Magical Cupboard Granny Square patterns so far. Thank you so much. We do combine them all into an ebook at the end of the year, but it's at the end of the year, and then we include sort of joining instructions and the border, so that whole project does get wrapped up into a single book, ebook at the end of the year. But for those of you who want to pick up the pattern as we go, I really appreciate it. It does help us out a lot here. And our blanket, the individual Granny Square patterns do include instructions for joining. I will be using the mattress or ladder stitch this year to join my squares. You can join your squares any way you want. So you can use any joining method you like. I see some of you have already started, which is great. If you look through some of the photographs we've been posting over in the community tab, some of you have been joining with a single crochet stitch, some of you just started whip stitching them together, some of you are doing a join as you go because you're adding like a little bit of a border. It's all perfectly fine because it won't affect the border we're going to put on it. And as you know, borders are usually also an optional thing. You can put on your own border if you're in a hurry to get it finished, or you can wait and see the border we're putting on. But if you are kind of eager to start joining your squares together, go ahead. Use whatever join method you want. Just make sure that all your squares are the same size because that does make joining a lot easier. And it will not affect the border pattern, I promise. So if you want to start joining your squares, go right ahead. I will be doing a tutorial on the mattress stitch. We've had a couple requests from people who've purchased the pattern who know we're doing the ladder stitch just to kind of do a little refresher video on it. We will do one of those that's coming, but we already have a video on joining squares with the mattress or ladder stitch because that's how we joined our Tunisian squares together. So I'll link that below as well if you want to check that out and kind of work ahead because it's the same pattern. It basically works the same way. And it's a neat way to join squares, and you can use whatever color you want, especially if you're doing what I do and I'm just sort of mixing all those colors together. The mattress or ladder stitch is kind of invisible, so it doesn't matter what color you join them with, it won't show. Anyway, that's it for this week. Thank you so much for joining us and for taking part in this year's calendar blanket. We will see you soon here on the Jayda InStitches show. Until then, stay safe, stay crafty, and have a great week. Bye, guys.
Hi, everybody. Mr. InStitches here. Thank you for watching today. Here are some of our other videos you might be interested in. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.